everyone, this is Liz, and I'm here to tell you what's coming up on the Popping Collars feed for August 2021. The Popping Collars regulars are on summer vacation this month, so we're bringing you a very special crossover episode we recorded with the hosts of the Being Truly podcast. Hear what happens when the longest-running Episcopal pod meets the new kid on the block. Greg has a great new interview this month with Edson Oda, the writer and director of the new film 9 Days. They talk about beauty, truth, and the afterlife on a new edition of Under the Stole. Things get a little dark on Going on 30 this month. Betsy and Greg try to survive the Stephen King thriller Misery. Stephen McHale is back on the Sacred Six this month to talk about Help, the soundtrack for the second Beatles movie. Finally, it's that time again. Ricardo and I are here to help you figure out what you need to be reading now in a brand new episode of the Poppin' Collars Book Club. Thanks for listening and keep those collars popped.
Hello, friends. My name's Greg Knight, and I like watching, thinking about, and talking about movies. And one of the great things about starting your own podcast is that there are some days where you get to actually talk to the creators of those movies. This is one of those days. This month, I got the chance to talk to Edson Oda, the writer and director of a film called 9 Days. Letterboxd.com says it's a story where a reclusive man conducts a series of interviews with human souls for a chance to be born. I'll tell you that this is a beautiful, thought-provoking meditation on what makes life precious, starring an impressive cast, including Winston Duke, Zazie Beetz, Benedict Wong, Tony Hale, Bill Skarsgård, and more. So what inspired the story for this young director's first feature film? Find out as I keep things under the stole with Edson Oda. But before we chat, here's the trailer.
You are being considered for the amazing opportunity of life. If you are selected, you will have the chance to be born in a fruitful environment where you can grow, develop, and accomplish.
Am I dead?
I wouldn't say you're alive or dead.
Are you the boss?
I would say a cog in the wheel.
How long is this process?
If you make it until the end, 9 days. Your senses will become unbearably sharper and stronger. It's your new beginning. You'll never remember me or anything else that happened in this place. But you will still be you.
Every single day, someone hurts someone else. Every single day, someone takes someone else's life.
Why are you focusing on that?
Why are you not focusing on that?
You've been here a few days, but you've lived every second.
Are you afraid?
Of what?
Nine days.
9 days.
Hey.
That's nice.
First off, before we get started, congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
This has been quite the journey for you. It's been kind of a long process for this film.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was, right. Did you watch from home? Or were you able to?
I did. I watched it on a screener,
Okay.
at home. But I'm actually, the way that it was shot, I'm actually kind of curious to see it on a screen.
Go see it.
I've got a theater.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've got a theater nearby that's going to have it. And so
yeah, I think
definitely-
August 6th you're gonna
Yeah.
be able to watch it. Uh-huh. Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah. I think this. Yeah, you can see it, at home, but I feel like this movie was made for the big screen. So yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. So I always start off these interviews. I don't necessarily want to do your entire bio. So I always start off with the question of what was the event in your life or the story that happened to you that made you think, this is what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker, or I want to make movies, or I want to tell stories. What was kind of the catalyst event for that?
Yeah, interesting. I was born and raised in Brazil, and I used to work in advertising. I always had this kind of when I was younger, I was like, what do I do? What career I follow? And then it was between sociology, psychology, and some things that I felt like, oh, this has to do with like a greater good, give something to someone. And then I also like love, things that we can just, have fun and exercise my creativity. And then it felt like advertising was a way to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose advertising at the time. And, it just like was telling stories and to other brands, to sell Coca-Cola and, all this products. But at some point in my career, I just, I took a course at a program at USC, a summer program. And then, we just need to, make a short film. And the short, just screen on the big screen. And while I was screening the big screen, it was just like so magical in a way that telling my own stories and people were like relating to that stories. And it wasn't like, the purpose of that wasn't like, selling, soft drinks, sodas, or, cars or anything. But it's just solely the purpose of that was just like people watching it and being touched by that somehow and connect with what was on the screen, and it felt pretty magical. And at the same time there's this kind of sense of receiving and giving something to people, and I went back to Brazil, and it felt like this feels bigger. This feels right somehow. It felt difficult as well, like to become a filmmaker, especially, being Brazilian, but I felt like I'm gonna take a chance. And then I decided to come to the US for my Master in Fine Arts program at USC.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it's terrifying, especially like when you have something that you can do and you could stay in that lane, but to let go of that, to give up that control and try something totally different.
And it was I was having a successful career in advertising. That was the thing. Like, I think it was like the peak of my career at the time. And but it was almost like it's almost like a calling, you have to do it, but and there's nothing you can do about it unless you do it. I just felt like that I would be frustrated for the rest of my life if I didn't. So
yeah, 100%. Can I ask you about Brazilian sort of filmmaking for a second? Since you come from that world, I'm always kind of curious. So to be fair, I'm limited to whatever Brazilian stuff kind of makes it up here to America. But I'm thinking of things like Bacurau, a couple of years ago, or like 3%.
Narcos. No, Narcos wasn't. It was directed by a Brazilian, actually. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Brazilian, but it wasn't about. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't made.
Like all of these things, and even your movie, 9 Days. All of these things seem to have like this common denominator of like something like a really creative way of looking at the world. It's like, okay, so we've got the concept we want to talk about, whether it's class or race or American exceptionalism or whatever it is that we're going to talk about. Like, but how can we kind of shift everything to look at it from a different point of view? Like, do you see that as a common thing amongst Brazilians?
Yeah, that's such a kind thing for you to say, and I feel like, Brazilian filmmakers or creative people, they're so creative and special in a way that, like movies, as you said, those movies, but also like, Seed of God or like Center Station. You have like, and it's interesting because most of the most creative, people I know, like they're Brazilian in a way that in the creativity, I don't know where it's so much about like playing with the tools that we have, because sometimes we don't have all the resources and big things, but we just have to figure out how to solve a problem, or how to how to convey that emotion with what you have at the moment. So I think that's a great territory for creativity to flourish somehow. And at the same time, we are so diverse. There's so many people from different backgrounds and ethnicities and races, and I think like it's a place where things are just mixed up in a way that they not just coexist, but they kind of interact with one another somehow. So I think it's all come from that, and also because there's something about Brazilians. I'm not gonna want to go like into the stereotype, but there's so much about like trying to understand the other and try to somehow interact with the other. And there's this kind of the curiosity of learning with the other person, I guess. So I think that all part of what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a perfect segue to talk about your film 9 Days, which we which is to say that what you were saying when you were talking about the kind of, well, let's use what we've got, like there is that kind of DIY feel a little bit to 9 Days, and you even have the characters doing it, right? So not to spoil anything, but at some points the characters have to kind of create experiences for other characters, and it has that kind of, okay, so let's figure out, what do we have? What are our resources, and how are we going to make this happen? So the one word that always gets thrown out, like in every review that I've read of 9 Days, the word that shows up all the time is that it's beautiful. It's the beauty of the film. Have you noticed that? Like,
that's a great compliment, actually. Yeah.
Like, do you think of the film that way? Did you, when you were conceiving it, were you kind of focused on, okay, so how do I take like the Utah landscape or this wall of televisions? How do I make this beautiful? Because it doesn't necessarily feel like it when you're thinking of it and just
it's interesting because beauty, it's so interesting you say that, because these days I was just having conversation with friends about like beauty and the concept of beauty. What is beauty, and it's so in the eyes of the person who sees it, but for me it was just but I wanted it to be visual somehow, somehow be a visual experience, and not necessarily like beautiful experience, because that's only like the audience can tell, but I wanted to be visual in a way that they would see something they're not very used to see, and or even things like they see, but they kind of don't pay attention to those things, and I felt like, okay, the South Flats, the desert landscapes can be one of those things, because it's so actually you can go there and see, or can just like watch some videos about that, but my intention is just showing a way that, okay, I haven't thought about it that way, and all the other things, like for example the TVs, the wall of TVs, that thing, like I was curious about, but I never thought about are they gonna make something beautiful. It was more like I'm curious to see how those elements they will be when they're together, and then it's more like about the fun and of just like putting those things together and say, let's see what happens. And then what happened, I say like, oh, I like what I see, they're visually appealing and very interesting and make me feel some things. And then I think that the beautiful, aspect of it it's not in my hands, but in people who watch it. So yeah, that's how I felt about it.
Yeah. The word that I wrote down, which is probably kind of different, I wrote down the word fragile with your movie, because it kind of feels like a lot of it has to deal with the fragility of life a little bit, how precious everything is, and you've got some characters that have to make some hard decisions. And the alternative to sort of strength is their fragility, their vulnerable natures, right? I just wonder how much of that was in your head where you were thinking about, well, what's the tension between these two things?
Yeah, no, it was in my head all the time, and it's interesting because I really like the word you use, fragile, because it goes with another word that I was thinking all the time, which is vulnerability, and vulnerability is just like, you okay with yourself not being strong all the time. You're okay with yourself being weak. And it's interesting because fragility, not necessarily, and even when I say like weak, it doesn't have the same sense of something that's bad or something that's, and fragile. So I think we always try to read those words as something that you have to avoid, because you need to be strong, you need to be, know everything. And I think like those like being vulnerable, being fragile, I think kind of the theme of the movie is pretty much being fragile, being vulnerable, going through difficult times. That actually is it's a part of being strong as well, so it's kind of it's not that one is better than the other one, but it's like there are just conditions of what makes us human, somehow. So I really like you bringing that up, because pretty much it's where most of my energy, emotions in writing 9 Days come from, I guess.
So then I guess my question for you is, do you see this as a hopeful story? Because there's another way of seeing it where, there's also this kind of tension where it's like there is sort of hope and love and beauty, which we've talked about to this point. But then there's also this other side of, many are called, but few are chosen. So
but I think, it's hopeful. It's a word that focuses just in the, in I think the goal of like the hope, and feel like, okay, so is there a happy end, for this? And it's tricky, but I feel like it's half. It's just like and like life is, because I think we like to, and I do as well, to think life as either happy or not. Either have a happy life, or people ask like, "Are you happy?" Or and it's not like that. It's just like we go through so much, and I feel like when you see like hope, it's hopeful, but also it talks about moments that are not very hopeful. And for example, even when you say like, "Oh, it's sad that people were not able to, to go to real world and all stuff." But if you see, okay, they have 9 days. It's just like in terms of a matter of time, because we're kind of in the same situation they are. If another race or something like a more evolved, creature watches us and see like, oh, these guys, they just have to live 90 years, 90 years. And though that race like would live like 900 years or something, they would like be very, oh, poor creatures or something. So it's just like like them, they have their time, and they can, even in a short period of time. And I think that's what, spoiler alert, what Emma figured out is that she, in that like 9 day period, she was able to live a full experience, She doesn't regret that. So I think that I think that's the hopeful part of 9 days. Is pretty much like a matter of perspective more than anything, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting just working in a place of faith. So working at churches or something like that. So much of what people think about is this fear of oblivion, this fear of non-existence, right?
Yeah.
That sort of existential crisis. And so they create narratives for themselves to convince themselves that they're going to live on. And the fact that your film can help kind of embrace the oblivion, it's comforting, right?
And it's interesting because it could even exist a word that it's oblivion, but also it could be something after that, but they don't mention it. So because they don't mention it, don't create the narrative, you pretty much assume that there's nothing, but it could be something. But I do, I'm the same way, and I think the fear of no existence is just terrifying to me.
Right.
And
well, speaking of that fear, I kind of joked earlier about the journey that your film has been on, but you're talking about when did you were at Sundance 2020, right?
I was Sundance 2020, yeah.
So you've had, gosh, what else was there? Promising Young Woman. And,
Promising Young Woman, Minari was there.
Minari, yeah.
Minari was there. Father was
40-year-old version was there. Yeah, so like all of these films have had their life and have lived their time, and here's 9 days just kind of floating. Do you feel like this journey that your film has been on kind of mirrors the narrative of your film a little bit? That you're waiting for life in the market?
That's so interesting. I never thought of all that. But that's so smart comparison, Actually, we are in the limbo, We're kind of Will,
what was that like for you? Just kind of waiting for the film to make it to the market.
Waiting the film itself, it was for me as a personal experience. I didn't bother me, waiting. Like I think we're just waiting for the. There's no time better than this one because it needs to be as you're talking earlier, we just needs to be seen the big screen, and I feel like now that people are more comfortable to go and see watching the big screen, I think they will have like a blast. They're gonna have a very unique experience, like just going and watching this, specifically this movie, coming out from difficult times as we're gradually coming out from. But and personally, it's interesting. I'm not a guy who likes that attention that much. So even at Sundance, I feel like, okay, yeah, it's good. But it's more like I want just people to watch the film. So it was a good break just to think about the process and everything was going through. And I'm never in a rush in terms of doing I've been waiting. Like I started this movie when I moved to the US somehow, even though it wasn't writing it, but I think my journey of making this movie started, just like 8 years ago. So it's just waiting like 1 year or 2 years for me was like, it wasn't that much.
Yeah.
So I think
that's good. So I was going to get you out of here on this. We always kind of wrap up our show. We have, an ongoing kind of segment that we do called Staff Picks. We kind of imagine ourselves back in the day when there was a Blockbuster Video, and we would all kind of put on the shelf what it was that we were recommending for people to check out. So if you had a pop culture shelf and you had your name on it and you were like, this is what I would love for folks to watch, and it can be anything in popular culture, what would be the thing that you would recommend? What would your staff
right now?
Be? Yeah,
show
right now.
Or anything. Yeah, go watch Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is good. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, and it's actually not everyone, but I think now it's more popular because of Netflix. But I think I remember at that time I was watching YouTube. I felt like I know about this show, and then everyone else kind of know. But I think not everyone. But it was a show that it's so. I'm really big fan of animes and all this stuff. So it was just like it's so exciting, and the journey and the mythology, and I cry every time I watch and see like flashbacks of Miyagi, so it's fun. It's very different from nowadays.
So funny you say that. I'm like in the middle of watching Cobra Kai right now.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And what I always think every time we watch an episode, I turn to my wife and I'm like, it kind of has a 90210 kind of feel to it. It's like that kind of drama with like, nostalgia.
It's kind of it's very naive, in a good way, I think. It makes me think of my, like a younger year. So yeah, it's good.
That's a great pick. Edson, thank you so much for coming on. I got to tell you, one of my favorite things that Roger Ebert ever said in a film review was when he was talking about The Gray, that Liam Neeson movie, and he said, this movie is going to sit with me for a long time, and your movie is going to sit with me for a long time. I think about your movie a lot. So congratulations.
Is Roger Ebert saying that in a good way or in a bad way?
I think so.
Okay,
it's one of those where it's like, it's one of those movies that it's just like, you just keep kind of coming back to, and thank you.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Congratulations on the film.
It was great talking to you. Yeah, a lot of fun. Thank you.
I appreciate it.